What's up, YouTube? Mike from Mass here, Mass Aquariums, and I'm about to give you episode 5 of how to set up a saltwater reef tank. And this episode is going to be on new tank syndrome. Now, when I say new tank syndrome, that doesn't necessarily mean my tank is a week old or a month old. New tank syndrome can go on in a reef tank for months and months and months. It all depends on a ton of different variations in your tank. Are you using RODI? Are you buying your water? Are you making your water? How well does your tap water convert through your system? What's the TDS reading? How high your lights are? How long your lights are on? Where your circulation pumps are running? What kind of filters you're running? You know, the variations go on and on and on. So I'm just going to tell you what my tank has been through, and my tank is about 3.5 months old. I recently just went through a big brown algae or dinoflagellate outbreak. I couldn't narrow it down. It may have been cyano. I posted it on Facebook, a bunch of pictures, and there was no really narrowed down consensus. All the groups you post on, everyone says it's definitely this, or it's definitely that, or it's definitely that, so you just can never tell. So, new tank syndrome. When you're setting up a reef tank, there's a ton of variations, a ton of variables that go into place after your equipment is in, and your rock is in, and your fish are in, and then you're adding corals and cleanup crews, and there's just a whole much more variations in a reef tank, I believe, in my opinion, than a freshwater tank. How long do you run your lights for? What intensity do you run your lights on? A lot of reef tank lights have like intensities from 1% to 100%. Like mine has a very large dial. How long do you run your lights on? How long do you run your blues versus your whites? Do your blues ramp up the tank and then your whites come on, and then the blues ramp down the tank? Where are your circulation pumps and your wave makers located in your tank to prevent dead spots where algae can build up and feed off that light? How much are you feeding your tank, and how much leftover nutrients are there for algae to consume, or there to be ammonia spikes because food's uneaten? These variables, fish keepers all recognize. When you're setting up a reef tank, it can be, I believe, tenfold than a freshwater tank. In my opinion, once again, I'm not an expert. I don't claim to be. I'm just going through the motions of what I've experienced with my tank, and I'm trying to share it with you. So, I just recently went through a little outbreak of something. I didn't want to take any chances. I didn't want to wait to figure out what it was, and I certainly didn't want to dose chemicals to clean it up. There's a variety of chemicals out there that you can, shut off your protein skimmer, rip out your carbon, dose a bunch of chemicals, and then fire everything up after a big water change. I wanted to try to go the natural route and try to figure out what was wrong with my tank before I went the chemical route. So what I did, I blacked out my entire tank. The back and front of my tank, back and side of my tank are covered in poster board. I covered the front and other side with poster board, put a giant black blanket over from my son, let me borrow it, thank you Nate, and I blacked my tank out for 3 days, 72 hours. I turned the heater down 5 degrees because basically when I put that blanket over and trapped everything in, all that heat, it's like a big greenhouse. But I did monitor. I have a electronic heater up here, temp gauge, and it kept it right around 79, 80. Didn't really fluctuate too much. I was lucky there. And then after the 3 days was up, I took everything down, took my filter off. I cleaned my filter. I added new sponges. I added a new bag of ChemiPure Blue. I also added, which was new, some GFO, some Phospan, and I added a filter floss pad that is phosphate and chemical remover. Now I'm still doing a review here on these pads, but I do like them a lot. They actually turn colors when what they're stripping from your tank might be too much. So for instance, they'll turn like a yellowish green if you have too much ammonia in your tank, and they'll let you know what's going on with your tank. But basically it's a phosphate remover. I stopped dosing my strontium and molybdenum like I was doing with my 10-gallon tank. Now this just goes to show you that all tanks are not the same. I took my 10-gallon tank, Saltwater, which is running absolutely perfect, and I tried to mimic that with this tank. Now all tanks are not the same. Maybe that's not going to work. Maybe I got to dose less. Who knows? I cut back my feeding, and now I'm feeding every other day. Fish do not need to eat every day. If they feed tiny bits a day, that's fine, but you don't need to feed your fish every day. And now again, I'm experimenting, but don't worry, the fish are not malnourished or anything. I feed them 5 different types of food, from veggie to protein to frozen brine shrimp, marine cuisine, mysis, and they're getting a variety of foods. But I'm cutting down a lot on my feeding, and I've also cut down a lot on my lights. Now I went from 10 hours a day, which is 10 hours of blues, 8 hours of whites, to 8 hours a day. Now I'm running 8 hours of blue and 6 hours of whites. I've cut down on my feeding. I've added phosphate remover. I've added a circulation pump to get rid of this dead spot right here. My wave maker is in position, and I have to tell you, over this last week, my corals are looking unbelievable. I have very minimal, I'm talking maybe like 2 to 5% diatoms in the tank. The substrate is looking absolutely immaculate. The fish are doing great. Everything is doing really great. And this is what it's all about. When you set up tanks, it's all about variables and figuring out what is what. Now, did I do a bunch of stuff at once? Yes. If something happens, I'll know it, because slowly I'm going to ramp up my lights. If something starts to happen, I'm going to stop the lights. You know, you can only do so much you can do, but my corals are doing unbelievable. Some of them might not be too opened up, as you saw in the beginning, because it's nighttime. The lights normally aren't on. I just flipped them on, but just then they all opened up absolutely gorgeous. They're spreading like crazy. Everything is really doing really good, and I'm happy with it. But the new tank syndrome can last a long time with a reef tank. You just need to figure out what's going on. You need to figure out where everything needs to be and what you're doing, just like any other tank. But you might want to spend a little bit more time on the reef tank, because you're spending, well, a lot more money on it. And, you know, you just want everything to be good. Since the beginning, I just want to let you know what kind of fish I have in here, because I did lose a few clowns right from the beginning. I'm going to assume it was Bruckinella or ammonia spikes, and the tank was just way too new for me to even be adding fish. But all these fish have been in here for a long time now. They're all doing great. I have 2 black Ocellaris clownfish. I have a green spot Watchman goby. I have 2 Bengali cardinals. I have a red-banded or candy cane goby. I've added a bunch of dragon's breath macroalgae to suck up some of those extra nutrients. You can see a little bit right here. Most of it is in the back of the tank where you can't see it. You know, it's going to go really tall, and it's just going to really suck up those extra nutrients to help out with removing them that you don't need. I still have my 2 shrimp from the very beginning and my whole cleanup crew. None of those have perished. And I'm running soft corals, LPS, and I still have 2 SPS up here, bird's nest and Pavlov, I think it's called, Pavlova. I don't know, Jimmy sent it to me. It's doing absolutely unbelievable. Those are my first 2 corals I got, and they're still growing. So, that's my update. I hope I didn't bore the shit out of you. And hit me up with some comments if you want to ask me any questions. I hope you enjoyed this episode 5. New tank syndrome. It's going to happen to everybody. It's happening to me, and I'm getting over it. It's going to happen again, maybe, but I'm hoping it's not. It's Mike from Mass. I'm out.